The roast was still steaming on the table. I'd marinated it since sunrise. Set the forks just right. Folded the napkins into little triangles like I used to, back when Daniel was small, and his father still sat at the head of this table. I always did that. Not for the food, but for the feeling. That night, I sat down last. And before I could even reach for the gravy, Rena's voice cut through the warmth. If you're gonna eat, just eat, but don't insert yourself in our business. She didn't shout. She didn't even look up. But her words landed heavy. Daniel said nothing. He just kept cutting his meat. Eyes down. Hands quiet. No flinch. No frown. No, Mom, don't talk to her like that. Just silence. He blinked. Once. Twice. Then I picked up my fork and ate as if I hadn't heard a thing. Dinner ended. I cleared the plates. Wiped the crumbs. Folded the napkins again, a bit slower this time. They went into the laundry bin like folded shame. I didn't say a word. Not when I washed the dishes. Not when I turned off the kitchen light. Not even when I got into bed and stared at the ceiling until morning. What hurt wasn't what she said. It was the way my son let her say it, like I wasn't even sitting there. Like my voice was something they'd both grown tired of. Like respect was something I had to earn again. I didn't confront them. I didn't cry. I just reached for the old file cabinet in the hallway closet. The one that creaks when you open it. The one I hadn't touched since 1996. Inside was a folder, brown, bent, and stubborn. Inside the folder, my name. Still printed clearly on the deed to this house. The house where I folded napkins. The house where I was told to stay out of their business. That night I didn't raise my voice. I let the paper do it for me. Sometimes, when your own child won't speak up for you, you find someone who will. Someone with a letterhead. Someone they can't talk over. Someone they have to read. Even if it breaks them. Even if it saves you. Would you have said something at that table? Or would you have folded your napkin too? Daniel used to tug at my sleeve every time he had something to say. He'd wait until I looked him in the eyes, then whisper as if his words were made of gold and he didn't want to waste any. That boy once cried over a crushed butterfly. He once wrote me a card that said I love you more than mac and cheese. I kept it in my Bible for years. Back when his voice was small and his heart even bigger. That was before Rena. Before the house felt colder, even when the heat was on. Before I learned to read silence like other mothers read text messages. When Daniel first brought Rena over, I made blueberry muffins. She barely touched them. She said she was gluten sensitive. Then drank a beer. I didn't say anything. I just swept the crumbs and told myself to give her time. But time doesn't soften every edge. Some people wear sharpness like jewelry. Rena corrected me the second time we met. It's not dinner party, Esther. We're calling it a gathering now. I nodded. Then went back to slicing carrots. Daniel smiled awkwardly. He didn't correct her. He never did. He used to call me Mama E. Now it's just hey. He used to stop by unannounced, hands full of grocery store flowers. Now he texts. We're busy this weekend. We. Always we. Never I. They moved in together after just 6 months. I didn't ask questions. Didn't warn him. Didn't say what I wanted to. His father had taught me that love is something you build with silence as much as bricks. But not all silence is sacred. Some of it rots. There was a Sunday, not long ago, when I made chicken pot pie. Daniel's favorite. I placed the pie on the counter, still bubbling at the edges. Rena walked in, sniffed the air, and said, "Oh, heavy food again." I said nothing. Daniel shrugged. He said he wasn't hungry. But I watched him sneak a bite when he thought I wasn't looking. He still loved it. He just forgot how to say it. Forgot how to tell me I was still welcome. Or maybe he remembered something else. Maybe Rena told him that home doesn't smell like thyme and butter anymore. Maybe she said it smells like guilt. And he believed her. I remember the first time Daniel looked through me. Not past me. Through me. Like I was made of smoke. It was Easter. I wore my pale blue dress, the one with the little daisy buttons. I ironed it the night before. Still smelled faintly of lavender starch. Rena was setting the table. Or rather directing someone else to. She moved a vase I'd placed right in the center. Said it blocked the sight lines for photos. I watched her rearrange every little thing. Salt here. Fork there. Napkins in a roll instead of a fan. She turned to me and said, "No offense, Esther, but some of your choices feel dated." Then she smiled. Like the words weren't sharp. Like I hadn't just spent 30 minutes polishing those same silver napkin rings her husband once made in Cub Scouts. Daniel didn't say a word. Just sipped his water. I thought maybe he hadn't heard. But when I looked at him, he blinked. That slow kind of blink men do when they've already decided not to intervene. That's when I knew. He wasn't going to stop her. Not now. Not later. And certainly not at dinner. She took his voice and replaced it with manners. Not kindness. Just manners. Polite silence. Calculated nods. He became a man who held doors but couldn't open his mouth. He used to hum when he walked down the hall. Used to leave notes on the fridge that said "Love you, Ma." Now he checks the time whenever I speak too long. Once he told me gently, "We're trying to avoid emotional triggers at meals." I wasn't sure what I'd triggered. Maybe the story I told about his first day of school. Maybe the way I called him sweetheart in front of Rena's friends. I don't know. I stopped talking much after that. Stopped bringing up his father. Stopped offering to host. They said they'd take over family holidays. It's just easier, Rena said. Easier for whom? They never asked if I wanted easier. They just handed me quietness and called it grace. There's a small linen closet at the end of my hallway. Behind the towels and winter quilts I keep a tin box. Green faded. Smells like dust and cedar. Inside are things I don't show anyone. A birthday card Daniel made at age 7. 2 teeth he lost wrapped in tissue. And a photo of his father holding him under a sycamore tree. That box reminds me who I was. And who he was before Rena started calling me Esther like a substitute teacher she didn't respect. One night, after they left early from dinner, said they had a couple seminar, I stayed up cleaning the kitchen alone. The chairs still warm from where they sat. Their glasses still marked with fingerprints. I poured the leftover wine into the sink. The smell lingered. Cranberry and oak. I wiped down the counter twice. Then I walked to the linen closet and opened that box. I held the photo for a long while. George looked so proud. So solid. He never let anyone dismiss me. Not once. Even when we disagreed, he defended me in public. Said a woman's dignity wasn't up for debate. That night I missed him more than I had in years. Not just his hands or his voice, but his presence at the table. The kind that doesn't fold when conflict walks in. Daniel didn't get that part of him. Or maybe he did once. And forgot. Or chose not to remember. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and saw Rena's planner on the table. I hadn't touched it before. But something in me shifted. I opened it, flipped past dates and meal logs and affirmations written in gold ink. Then I saw it. A little note scribbled beside the third Saturday. Dinner with E, stay neutral. Neutral. Like I was a war zone. Like my presence required strategy. I closed the book and pushed it aside. That evening, Daniel called. Said they might skip Sunday. Said they needed space. I said okay. Then I went to my closet, pulled out my husband's old file folder and ran my hand along the edge of it. The paper inside felt heavier than I remembered. But maybe that's what dignity weighs when you finally stop apologizing for being in your own home. It started with birthdays. Not mine. Daniel's. The first year he was with Rena, they threw him a party at some rooftop bar downtown. I found out on Facebook. The photos were already posted by the time I opened the app. There was a cake. Blue and white. With a little plastic tennis racket on top. Daniel used to love tennis. I was the one who taught him how to serve. Every Saturday, we'd walk to the courts at Weaver Park. He'd wear mismatched socks and call it style. But in that photo, he looked polished. Button-down shirt. Hands behind Rena's waist. They looked like a magazine ad. I wasn't in the background. Because I wasn't there. I stared at that screen for nearly an hour. Zooming in. Looking for someone I might know. A cousin. A coworker. Anyone who might have said, "Where's your mother?" But no one did. No one thought I was missing. Because to them I wasn't supposed to be there at all. The following month, I called Daniel to ask if he'd like to come over for dinner. Just him. No pressure. He paused. Said he'd check with Rena. Check. Like asking if I had peanuts in the house required clearance. He called back 2 days later. Said it might be better if we met in public next time. Neutral ground, he said. That word again. Neutral. As if my kitchen had turned hostile. As if the woman who ironed his baby onesies was suddenly a threat. I wanted to ask what Rena was afraid of. My stories. My casserole. Or maybe just the way I remembered him. Because that's what I held that no one else could touch. The real Daniel. Not the polished man with careful smiles and group texts. But the boy who made mud pies and cried when I burned my hand. The boy who once said, "When I grow up, I want to live in your house forever." And now he could barely stay an hour. That's when I knew. This wasn't distance. It was deletion. And I was being erased. One Sunday I made lasagna. The good kind. With bechamel. Not just ricotta and sauce. I started early. Sliced the garlic thin like George used to do. Layered the noodles by hand. By noon the whole house smelled like basil and browned butter. Daniel had promised to come. I set the table for 3. Rena always picked at the salad, but I still set her a place. I even folded the cloth napkins. Blue ones this time. The ones Daniel liked when he was little. They did not show up. No call. No text. Just silence. I sat for a while at the edge of the table staring at the steam rising from untouched plates. Then I put everything in the fridge. By evening, I got a message. Sorry. Something came up. We'll reschedule. That was all. No reason. No apology. Just something. Like my time was a disposable thing. Like my food had no memory. But food remembers. It soaks in love and carries it forward. Every bite is story retold. And that lasagna was a story I made with care. But it stayed sealed in glass containers for days. Eventually, I threw it out. The smell of time had turned bitter. I told myself not to take it personally. But grief doesn't ask for permission. It just settles in. That week I bumped into one of Daniel's coworkers at the grocery store. A young man with wide eyes and too much hair gel. He smiled politely and said, I heard the house is lovely. Rena says the kitchen feels very curated. Curated. Like a museum. Like I was the relic they hadn't yet removed. I nodded, made a polite noise, then walked straight past the pasta aisle. At checkout, I forgot my own phone number. The cashier had to prompt me twice. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, counted each tiny crack like it could map how many ways I'd been left out. And all I could think was, if this is love, why does it feel like I'm no longer welcome in the life I helped build? A few weeks later, they hosted a barbecue. Not just any barbecue, a friends and family appreciation day, Rena's words. She made a flyer, posted it on her home design page. Pastels, cursive fonts, photos of mason jars with lemonade. I wasn't invited, but Maya was. My granddaughter. Daniel's child from before Rena. The one he had too young but never stopped loving. She came by the next day with a plate of leftover potato salad and a worried look. Grandma, she said, did they not tell you about the party? I smiled. Soft practiced. No, baby. They must have forgotten. She bit her lip. Saturday down on the edge of the couch. I asked Dad. He said it was more of a young crowd thing. Didn't want you to feel out of place. Out of place. In the backyard I planted. With the table, I stained by hand. With the rose bush Daniel gave me when he turned 16 and said sorry for crashing his bike into the porch. Out of place. That stayed with me. That night I walked out back. The grill was still warm from where they'd set it on bricks. There were bits of paper napkin caught in the grass. Plastic forks. The smell of charcoal and something sweet, maybe baked beans. I sat on the swing. The one George hung from chains 20 years ago. It creaked soft and familiar. The sky was still glowing with the last of the day's gold. And I thought to myself, this isn't exile. This is eviction in slow motion. Not with boxes and locks, but with cold smiles and party lists that conveniently leave your name off. I ran my hand along the wood grain of the swing. Felt the grooves we carved. One for Daniel. One for George. None for me. Maybe that was always the problem. I was the one who carved spaces for others, but never wrote my own name down. Well, that was going to change. Not with shouting. Not with begging. But with the quiet kind of pen that makes lawyers nod. The kind that lets paper speak where suns fall silent. The envelope was cream-colored. Thick. Embossed. My name in the return address window, spelled wrong. Esther, not Esther. A small mistake. But it told me everything I needed to know. Inside was a packet of forms. Loan adjustment. Home equity restructuring. My house. The same house George and I built one weekend at a time. Brick by brick. Saved from teacher paychecks and night shifts. And now someone had checked a box that said primary occupant Daniel Langley. There was no box for mother who scrubbed the baseboards. No checkbox for widow who kept the roof dry. Just Daniel. And Rena listed as secondary signer. I read the documents twice. 3 times. It wasn't a full transfer. Not yet. But it was a start. A quiet foot in the door. I folded the papers slowly and set them beside the stove. That night I made tea and stood in the doorway of the den. This was the room George hung his reading lamp, where he fell asleep with a book on his chest and my feet tucked under his blanket. Daniel used to crawl in there all blanket and elbows and whisper, "Daddy snores like a bear." He said it like it was magic. I closed my eyes and pictured that small boy signing papers without asking who taught him to spell his name. The next morning I called Daniel. Asked, "What's this envelope you sent?" Long pause. Oh right. Rena's uncle is helping us restructure things. Just formality. Formality for what? He cleared his throat. We're trying to get a better rate. Use the equity for some updates. Flooring. A new deck. I let the silence stretch. You live in my house, Daniel. Our house, he corrected. No, I said. You moved into mine. Another pause. Longer this time. We just assumed. With you not using the back rooms, and being alone now. I waited. It was always the same. Assumption. Justification. Silence. He didn't say sorry. Didn't ask if I was okay with it. Just said, Mom, don't worry. It's just paperwork. But I knew. Paperwork is how people disappear without noise. That envelope wasn't a form. It was a warning. A few days later, Rena dropped by unannounced. She never came alone before. Always with Daniel. Always smiling like she was posing for a picture. But that day, she stood in my doorway with sunglasses on and a manila folder in her hand. I was still in my apron. Had been cleaning out the spice cabinet. She didn't ask to come in. Just stepped past me like the hallway was hers. I brought the updated forms, she said. They'll make refinancing easier. I looked at the folder. Didn't reach for it. She set it on the kitchen table and sat down without invitation. Honestly, she said this could benefit you too. Lower rates, better maintenance, less paperwork in your name. I stirred my tea. Did not speak. She kept going. We've been looking at getting the bathroom redone. The tub's outdated. And we want to turn the back room into a nursery just in case. She smiled again. That smile people wear when they're carving you out but calling it love. You'll still have your space, of course, she added. The front bedroom. It has great light. My house has 4 bedrooms. She offered me one. Like a guest. I looked at her. Carefully. Not with anger. But with the kind of quiet you learn after too many disappointments. Does Daniel know you're here? She laughed. Light fake. He trusts me with the details. Then, she reached into her bag and pulled out a pen. The kind they give you at banks. Heavy. Branded. Blue ink. She slid it across the table. You just need to sign on the yellow tab. There it was. The illusion of choice. All dressed up in manners and convenience. I picked up the pen. Turned it in my fingers. The ink felt cold. Like a warning. She sipped her coffee, looked around the room. These curtains could really use an update, she said. He smiled. Soft. Still. I sewed those myself. In 1983. She blinked. Oh. Silence. Not heavy. Not sharp. Just long. I set the pen down. Pushed the folder gently back. I'll have my lawyer look it over. Her expression shifted. Just a flicker. I thought we could just. You thought wrong. She stood up. Smoothed her blouse. Of course, she said, all sugar again. Then she left. But the smell of her perfume lingered long after. Vanilla and lavender. Sweetness, overwrought. That evening I opened the file cabinet in the hallway. The one with the brass handle, and the drawer that sticks if you pull it too fast. Inside was the folder George kept. Thick brown, held together by a red string. His handwriting still on the label. House papers. Langley. I sat at the dining table, the same one Rena had called dated, and began to read. There it was. The original deed. Signed in 1996. Joint ownership. George and Esther Langley. No Daniel. No Rena. I turned each page, slowly pressing the corners flat. There were notes about the down payment, mortgage schedules, tax history, and then a letter. Folded neatly behind the last page. From James Howell, our lawyer. Dated the same week George came home with his diagnosis. The letter confirmed that in the event of his passing, ownership would remain with me unless I chose otherwise. It was never updated. Never transferred. Never even discussed again. Because George trusted me. Because he knew I would know what to do when the time came. I closed the folder. Ran my palm across the wood grain of the table. I had sanded this table myself after George spilled varnish in '98. Daniel had helped me hold the legs steady. He was 12. Wore socks with holes in them. Smelled like peanut butter and sunshine. I traced that memory like a line in scripture. The next morning I called James. His voice hadn't changed. Still gravel and warmth. Esther, he said, I was wondering when you'd call. We met the following Thursday. He still wore suspenders. Still kept butterscotch in his drawer. I handed him the envelope Rena left. Told him what Daniel had said. James read everything in silence. Then he looked up. Do you want to sell? I shook my head. Then we remind them what ownership really means. He reached for a blank form. Wrote slowly, carefully, like dignity had a shape on paper. I did not ask for revenge. I asked for recognition. James nodded. I'll draft the letter myself, he said. It would be direct. Not cruel. Just a voice they could not ignore. A voice in black ink. The kind of voice that doesn't need to shout to shake a room. The kind that reminds people exactly where the foundation begins. The letter was sent on a Tuesday. Simple envelope. No bold print. No threats. Just truth. James mailed it himself. Said handwritten signatures still meant something. I did not tell Daniel. Did not warn Rena. I watered my plants that morning. Fed the cat that wanders onto my porch. Baked cornbread with honey. Then I sat down in the living room and waited for nothing in particular. 2 days later Daniel showed up. No knock. Just the soft squeak of the screen door. He looked tired. Less polished. Hair uncombed. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, holding the letter. His voice wasn't angry. Just confused. Like a child who couldn't find his shoes. I looked at him. You never asked, I said. He paced. Rubbed the back of his neck. You know this complicates things for us. Us. Always that word. I'm your son, Mom. I nodded. You are. But this feels like punishment. Itiltelmihil. You let her call me Esther. At my own table. He swallowed. That's not the same. Isn't it? I stood. Slowly. The bones in my knees clicked like old clock hands. I gave you everything I had, Daniel. Time. Home. Years I can't get back. He opened his mouth. Closed it again. I could see it. The war behind his eyes. The tug between memory and marriage. You could have just told me you were hurt. I walked to the cabinet. Pulled down the chipped mug with the sunflower handle. The one he made in art class. I did. He stared at the mug. Said nothing. That silence was worse than insult. Because it was familiar. Practiced. Safe. I didn't mean for this to happen, he whispered. But it did. His shoulders sank. She's pregnant, he said suddenly. My breath caught. Just for a second. He waited. For warmth. For blessing. For permission. I said nothing. He shifted his weight. We wanted to fix up the house before the baby comes. Make it ready. I nodded. Once. I made this house ready before you were born. The wind outside picked up. Rattled the porch swing. Daniel looked around the room like he was seeing it for the first time. He walked to the fireplace. Touched the edge of the frame. I don't want to fight you. I'm not fighting, I said. I'm remembering. He left without finishing his sentence. The screen door didn't slam. It just sighed. That night, I sat on the porch with the cornbread still warm beside me. I watched the moon rise over the garden beds George built by hand, and I whispered into the dark. Maybe being forgotten hurts more when you remember everything. The days after he left felt quieter than usual. Not the peaceful kind. The hollow kind. Like the space between thunder and rain. I moved slower. Not because of age, but because everything I touched felt like it belonged to someone else now. The living room. The doorknobs. Even the smell of the laundry soap Daniel used to love. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the folder again. Not the new papers. The old ones. The ones with my name. And George's lash. The ones that still believed in us as a family. I opened the windows to let in the spring air. It carried the scent of distant firewood and something sweet. Honeysuckle maybe. I used to clip them and float them in bowls when Daniel was a boy. He said they smelled like jelly beans and secrets. That afternoon, Maya came by. No notice. No agenda. Just her and a book in her backpack. Can I read on the porch, she asked. I nodded. She made herself a snack, apple slices and peanut butter. Used the same blue plate her father once broke and cried about for 2 hours. She didn't ask questions. But before she left, she stopped at the door and turned back. You, okay, Grandma? I looked at her. Really looked. 14. Long legs. Eyes like her father's when he still asked me to braid his hair. I'm just a little tired, I said. She nodded. Handed me a folded note. I wrote this in class. We had to write about a place that feels safe. I opened it after she left. One sentence. Grandma's porch smells like warm bread and makes my heart slow down. I cried then. For the first time in weeks. Not from pain. But because someone remembered something soft about me. Someone still saw me. That night, I sat by the fireplace with a quilt over my lap and a mug of warm milk. I didn't think about Daniel. Not directly. But I did wonder how a man forgets the scent of honeysuckle or the sound of his own mother's laugh on Sunday mornings. I wondered how a boy who once said, "This is the best day ever" over a picnic in the backyard could grow up and look at the same yard like a burden. And I wondered if maybe I had waited too long to remind him who I was. Not the woman at the table. Not the name on the envelope. But the hands that packed his lunch. The arms that rocked him through croup and fever. The voice that once sang off-key just to make him smile before school. Sometimes you don't lose people all at once. You lose them nap by nap. Weekend by weekend. Signature by silent signature. And by the time you notice, they've already packed the part of you they no longer need. Left the rest in the guest room. I started waking up before the birds. Not out of worry, but something else. A kind of quiet strength that moved through my spine before the sun did. I'd sit at the kitchen window with my coffee, watch the light spill across the fence George painted 30 years ago. Paint still held in places. Like memory. Fading but not gone. That week, I pulled out the box of old seeds from the pantry shelf. Labeled in George's handwriting. Morning Glory. Bee Balm. Tomato Heirloom. I ran my fingers along the envelopes. They crinkled like dry leaves. And I decided to plant something. Not to harvest. Just to watch it grow. I stepped into the backyard with a trowel and a basket. The soil was hard at first, dry from spring sun. But as I dug, it softened. Worms moved lazily beneath the top layer. I hummed a hymn I hadn't sung in years. Something about grace falling like rain. By mid-morning I had 3 beds cleared. 2 ready for seedlings. 1 just left open for whatever wanted to find its way in. I didn't check my phone. Didn't read the news. Didn't wonder what Rena would say about dirt under my nails. It felt good to feel strong in small ways. Later I wiped the counters. Washed the mugs. Turned on the radio to the classical station George used to like. A cello began to play. Low. Slow. Full of longing. And for the first time in weeks I danced. Just a little. 1 step. Then another. Bare feet. Clean floor. Curtains lifting in the breeze. I closed my eyes and let my arms rise. Not in performance. But release. Somewhere between the tea kettle whistling and the cello sighing I remembered myself. Not just the mother. Not just the wife. But the girl who once dreamed of becoming a writer. A traveler. A woman who took up space without apology. The girl who still lived inside these old bones. Waiting. Not to be rescued, but to be remembered by the one person who had almost forgotten her. Me. The next morning I opened the attic door. It creaked like it always had. Dust rose in ribbons as I climbed the narrow stairs. The air smelled of cedar old glue and something faintly sweet, maybe dried oranges from a Christmas long gone. I hadn't been up there since before George passed. Not because I couldn't. Because I didn't want to face what we'd saved. But that day, I was ready. I found the box labeled, Daniel, School Years. Faded marker. Ripped corner. Inside a blue lunchbox with a missing latch, a Pinewood Derby car math tests with smiley faces and a note in crayon that said I like when you hug me. You smell like pancakes. I sat on the attic floor, legs crossed, sunlight, slicing through the small round window. I held that note as if it might still be warm, and I realized I had spent years trying to be less present, less opinionated, less emotional. To keep the peace. To not embarrass him. To make Rena comfortable. But there in that dusty attic surrounded by the pieces of our history I understood something clearer than any court ruling. I wasn't the problem. I was the memory they were trying to overwrite. And that's why they needed my silence. Because my presence reminded Daniel of a version of himself that didn't need managing. Just love. That night I brought the lunchbox downstairs. Set it gently on the kitchen counter. I didn't clean it. Didn't restore it. Left it as it was. I brewed chamomile tea. Read the local paper. Folded a soft blanket over the back of George's favorite chair. There was no grand plan. No speech. No strategy. Just a quiet reclaiming. A setting back of things to where they belonged. In the garden, the morning glories had begun to stir. Still closed, but reaching. And I thought maybe I didn't need Daniel's permission to hold space here. Maybe the legacy I was building didn't need an audience. Maybe it just needed sunlight, water, and time. The same way a wounded root still knows how to send up new leaves. On Sunday morning I opened all the windows. The air smelled like damp earth and laundry hung too long in the sun. I set the table for one. Used the good china. Poured orange juice into a crystal glass. Not because anyone was coming, but because I was still here. Still worthy of a proper seat at my own table. I buttered toast slowly. Listened to birds chatter in the hydrangea bush. The clock ticked. Somewhere a car passed. No one called. No one texted. And yet I felt whole. After breakfast, I stepped into the yard. Wore George's old flannel still soft in the elbows. The garden beds were quiet but not empty. Little shoots pushed through the soil. Fragile. Determined. I knelt down, brushed the dirt gently with 2 fingers. New life never asks for permission. It just finds the sun and begins. I stayed there a while. Not doing. Just being. A neighbor waved from across the fence. I waved back. Then I stood, brushed off my knees, and went inside. At the kitchen table, the old lunchbox still waited. I left it there. Not for Daniel. Not as a symbol. Just as a truth. This was his once. And now it reminded me what love used to look like before it learned to apologize for itself. Later that day, I baked a pie. Apple with cinnamon and a lattice crust I wove slow and even. I wrote a note on plain paper. For Maya. 1 slice is never enough. I wrapped the pie carefully, placed the note on top, and sent it with the mailman who always hums old gospel songs. I didn't write a return address. She would know. That evening, I sat on the porch with my tea and the quilt over my lap. The sky turned soft pink. The kind of pink that makes you forgive the world just a little. And I whispered. Not to anyone in particular. I am not a shadow in this home. I am the light they built it by. Have you ever had to reclaim your place quietly? We invite you to share your own quiet victories below. Your voice matters here. You are not invisible. The letter came on a Thursday. From James. Typed neatly. 3 pages. No fluff. Just facts. Dates. Rights. And 1 very clear sentence at the end. Any attempt to alter ownership without full consent will be considered invalid. I read it 3 times. Then folded it carefully and placed it inside a manila envelope. Next to it I placed a small photograph. Daniel at age 10. Smeared cheeks. Holding a paper crown made from cereal box cardboard. I mailed both to the address Daniel and Rena now used on their tax forms. No note. No warning. Just a message in 2 parts. The legal kind. And the personal kind. That evening I boiled potatoes and baked cod. Set 2 plates, 1 for me, 1 for memory. I had begun to enjoy the ritual of stillness. Not waiting. Just being. The next day, I walked to the bank. The teller knew me. Her name was Kelsey. She wore pink nail polish and called me Miss Langley even when I wore gardening shoes. I'd like to update some things, I said. She smiled. Of course. What do you need? I handed her the document James had prepared. It gave me full control of all remaining accounts and instructed the bank to reject any co-signature requests without direct in-person verification. Kelsey read it slowly. Then looked at me. Do you need help setting up alerts? I nodded. She typed gently. Fingers quick. No judgment. The bank had once held the first check George and I deposited from our wedding gifts. Now it held the pieces of my new boundary. I walked out into the sunlight. Felt the warmth on my face. Carried nothing but my purse and a sense of calm. No anger. No revenge. Just clarity. On the way home, I passed by the community board outside the library. A new notice was pinned there. Calligraphy classes. Thursdays at 4. I stood for a moment. George had loved handwriting. Said the way a person wrote revealed how they carried their memories. I took a pen from my bag and wrote my name on the sign-up sheet. Esther Langley. Clear. Firm. Stillmain. On Saturday, I rearranged the bookshelves. Not because they needed it. Because I wanted to touch what had touched me. Shelves of worn spines. George's field guides. My poetry anthologies. Daniel's childhood Bible with the corners chewed from Sunday fidgets. I placed the books in new order. Not alphabetically. Not by size. By memory. Top shelf the books that carried me through loneliness. Bottom shelf the ones Daniel used to pull just to ask me what the words meant. When I finished, I made a pot of lentil soup. Used the old spice mix George once called magic dust. The kitchen filled with the scent of cumin and thyme. I left the back door open. Let the breeze roll in. The curtains fluttered like wings. Around noon, a letter slid under my front door. Not mailed. Placed by hand. I recognized Rena's handwriting before I even opened it. It was polite. Almost tender. She said she hoped we could talk. That she understood I felt protective. That they respected my decisions but needed a clearer understanding of our future arrangement. As if I were a guest requesting an extension, I set the letter aside. Did not answer. Instead, I walked to the old writing desk George built from pine. Inside a set of envelopes. Cream. Heavy. I pulled out one and began to write. Not to Daniel. Not to Rena. To myself. A will. Simple. Direct. No apologies. No flourishes. I listed the house. The garden tools. The photo albums. The ceramic pie dish George bought me in 1978. And then I named my beneficiary. Maya Langley. No second name. No co-beneficiary. Just Maya. The one who still sits on my porch. The one who writes about places that feel safe. When I finished, I sealed it and placed it in the tin box with the sunflower mug and the note about pancakes. I did not feel cruel. I felt anchored. That night I lit a candle and sat by the window with a book I hadn't touched in years. The flame flickered. Soft. Steady. And I thought, this is what strength sounds like when it finally stops asking to be translated. Monday morning came with the sound of lawnmowers and sparrows tapping the gutters. I dressed slowly. Pressed my slacks. Chose a blouse, with buttons shaped like leaves. I wore the brooch George gave me on our 25th anniversary. The one shaped like a tiny open book. At 10 o'clock sharp I met James outside the courthouse annex. He held the door. Nodded once. Said nothing. We walked in together. No fuss. No audience. Just purpose. At the front desk I handed over the documents. The clerk was young. Polite. Her nails painted pale blue. She read the forms. Stamped them. And asked gently. Is there anything else we can help you with today? Mrs. Langley. I smiled. Number. That will be all. We stepped outside. The sun was warm but not too much. A breeze moved through the trees. James turned to me. I'll send copies for your records. I nodded. And for theirs. He hesitated. Are you expecting backlash? I shook my head. I am expecting silence. Which is how they started this. And how I will finish it. He smiled then. That soft kind of smile only older men still know how to wear. No pity. Just respect. I walked home. Alone. No one honked. No one called. But the rhythm of my feet on the sidewalk matched my heart. Steady. Unrushed. When I got back, the house felt settled. Not heavy. Not haunted. Just still. I opened the curtains. Let the light in. Watered the seedlings. In the kitchen, the envelope from Rena still sat where I had left it. I picked it up. Folded it once more. Then placed it in the trash. Gently. Without noise. That afternoon I wrote 3 letters. One to Maya. One to my friend Margaret in Ohio. And one to myself. The letter to me was the hardest. Because I had to say the thing I had waited years to hear. I believe you did the best you could. And that was enough. I placed it inside a book on the third shelf. The one with pressed flowers between the pages. That night I ate dinner at the table. Lit one candle. Used a linen napkin. Took my time. And as I washed the dishes, I felt something shift. Not in them. In me. A quiet knowing that I no longer lived on borrowed permission. But on ground I had reclaimed inch by inch. With a name they could no longer erase. The knock came at 6:42 in the evening. On a Thursday evening. I was peeling apples for a tart. The knife paused mid-slice. Through the window, I saw Daniel's car. Not Rena's. Just his. He stood on the porch like someone unsure if they were knocking on the right door. I opened it without a word. He held a folder. The same manila color James used. But this one was crumpled at the edges. Thumb marked. Traveled. I got the copy, he said. I nodded. He looked older. Not aged. Just tired in the way men do when they've run out of excuses. I didn't know you'd gone that far. I stepped aside. Let him in. He didn't sit. Just hovered near the table, his fingers brushing the edge of the sunflower mug. She's upset, he said softly. I reached for the bowl of apple peels. Dropped another curl into it. I imagine she is. He cleared his throat. I should have talked to you. Before the refinancing. Before the paperwork. You should have remembered whose name was still on the deed. Silence. Not sharp. Not angry. Just final. He opened the folder. Pulled out a letter. Typed. 2 paragraphs. I saw James's letterhead at the top. We've consulted someone else, Daniel said. They confirmed. You're well within your rights. Of course I am, I said. I never gave them away. He winced. Not at the tone. At the truth. I walked to the sink. Rinsed my hands. Dried them on the towel with the embroidered lemon Maya gave me last Christmas. When I turned he was still standing. Frotzen. I don't want this to break us, he said. It didn't, I replied. It just showed what was already cracked. He looked around the kitchen like it had betrayed him. The shelves. The stove. The chair with the loose rung he used to wobble as a boy. This house feels different, he said. It should. He met my eyes. What now? I held his gaze. Steady. Warm but firm. Now you decide what kind of man you want to be under a roof you did not build. He didn't reply. Just folded the letter slowly. Tucked it back in the folder. And for once he didn't try to explain. That was the beginning of something I didn't expect. Not remorse. But recognition. The next day, Rena came. No warning. Just the sharp knock of someone used to doors opening for her. I opened it slowly. She didn't wait for an invitation. She wore sunglasses again. Even though it was cloudy. In her hand was a stack of papers. Not messy, not folded. Just clean and waiting for my surrender. I read the letter, she said. I said nothing. Stepped aside. Let her speak on my floor. You blindsided us. I walked to the stove. Turned off the kettle. It had just begun to sing. You went behind our backs. No, I said. I stood behind my own name. She blinked. Then smiled. A different kind this time. Thin. Controlled. Like pressed silk. I understand this is emotional for you. It isn't. She tilted her head. You've always been so gracious. Istilam. But this legal stance, it changes everything. I poured tea into 2 cups. Only one got sugar. Good, I said. Then it's working. She walked to the bookshelf. Ran her fingers along the spines. Daniel's trying, she said. He wants to fix this. He wants comfort without accountability. She turned sharply. You don't have to be cruel. I placed the cup in front of her. Did not sit. I'm not. But I will not be erased to make your life easier. She didn't touch the tea. Do you think this will make Maya love you more? I met her eyes. Maya already knows who bakes her pies and folds her letters with care. Her jaw tensed. But she said nothing. I continued. You asked for access. I asked for respect. Only one of us got what they wanted. The silence thickened, settled on the table like dust. She pulled her sunglasses off, laid them gently beside the tea. Where do we go from here? I looked at the envelope she had placed beside the sugar jar. I pushed it back toward her. You go back to your home, and I stay in mine. She stood. Slowly. No slamming. No shouting. But her silence wasn't quiet this time. It was acknowledgement. She picked up the envelope. Slid her glasses back on. Daniel won't forget this. I nodded. Good. Neither will I. The house was quiet after she left. No slammed door. No final word. Just the low click of boundaries falling into place. I washed the teacups. Folded the towel. Fed the cat that wandered back like nothing had changed. That evening, I lit the porch lamp early. The sky was soft with clouds. Birdsong trailed off like a sigh. At 7 o'clock, Daniel came again. Alone. Again. He did not knock this time. Just stood by the gate. Waiting. I stepped outside. He looked tired. Not just in his eyes. In the way he held his shoulders. Like they had forgotten how to rise. He spoke first. She's furious. I nodded. She thought you would bend. I nodded again. She didn't understand how much of this house was actually you. I looked at him. Steady. It always was. He stepped closer. Not too close. Do you hate me? I shook my head. I remember you too well to hate you. His eyes dropped. Fixed on the brick path he used to ride his tricycle on. I let things happen. Things I shouldn't have. You let her speak when it should have been you. He swallowed hard. I thought silence would keep the peace. It never does. He looked up. Tears close but not falling. I read the will. I waited. She cried when she saw Maya's name. Of course she did. He smiled barely. She said you were cutting us out. I'm not cutting. I'm clarifying. He stepped onto the first step. Looked around. The paint's holding well. I redid it last year. By myself. He nodded. Then paused. I don't want this to be the end. It doesn't have to be. But it won't look like before. He looked up at me. Will I still be welcome on Sundays? I took a breath. Let it out slowly. If you knock. If you ask. And if you remember who you're knocking for. He nodded. Hands in pockets. Do I bring anything? I thought for a moment. Yes, I said. Bring your daughter. And bring your silence, the kind that listens. He nodded again. Then turned back down the steps. Walked slowly toward the car. This time, he looked back before getting in. Not to wave. Just to make sure I was still standing there. I was. It was early spring when the wisteria bloomed. Purple draped over the back fence like soft curtains. The air smelled of new grass and soil still damp from last rain. I sat on the porch with a book I wasn't reading. The sun had found its way to the corner of the steps. Warmth settled into my knees. Maya came that afternoon. She didn't text. Didn't knock. Just appeared in the familiar way only children know how to do. I brought you something, she said. From her backpack she pulled a spiral notebook. Blue cover. Edges bent. I started writing more, she added. Essays. Stuff from memory. I smiled. Good memories. She shrugged. Some. Then sat beside me and rested her head on my shoulder. I don't like what Dad let happen, she said quietly. Me neither. But I like who you are even when people forget. I kissed the top of her hair. It smelled like lilac shampoo and something entirely hers. I've been thinking about college, she said. Maybe North Carolina. Stay close. You go wherever the wind pulls, I told her. But always know you have roots here. She nodded. Her hand found mine. We sat like that for a long time. Later, after she left, I walked to the far corner of the yard. The garden beds were thriving. Tomatoes climbing. Basil full. One sunflower already standing taller than the fence. I reached down and pulled the smallest weed from between the rows. Not because it was hurting anything. Just to make space. Inside, I opened the drawer with the sunflower mug and the tin box. Pulled out the envelope with my will inside. Read it one last time. The name's still there. Maya Langley. No hesitación. No footnote. I placed it back and closed the drawer with a soft click. Then I stood in the hallway and looked at the pictures on the wall. George with his fishing pole. Daniel in his graduation cap, Maya holding a puppy that only lived 2 weeks but left joy like a candle stub. Each frame was a reminder that I had lived here. Fully. Softly. With my name on every memory. I made tea. Watched the sky shift from blue to honey. In the quiet, I heard birds. A car door. Then footsteps that did not need to ask permission anymore. Not to return. But maybe to relearn. And still I did not move. Because sometimes legacy means staying still so others remember how to come home. I saw them from the window. Daniel and Maya. Walking slowly up the path. No urgency. No show. Just 2 shadows moving toward the porch like they belonged again. Maya held something. A paper bag. A corner of foil peeking out. I opened the door before they reached the steps. She smiled. I made the pie, this time. Same recipe. Did you braid the crust? 3 strands. Then it's official. Daniel stayed behind her. Hands in pockets. Eyes unsure. Hi, Mom. I nodded. Moved aside. We sat at the table with 3 plates. Maya served. Daniel poured tea. No one led. There was a new kind of silence. Not cold. Not broken. Just wide enough for honesty to sit between us. Halfway through the meal, Daniel cleared his throat. I read the letter you wrote to yourself, he said. I looked up. Maya found it. In the book with the pressed flowers. I turned to her. I only meant for your eyes. She shrugged. I think he needed it too. Daniel looked down at his hands. I didn't understand. How deep it all went. How far you'd bent without breaking. He paused. I want to do better. You don't have to be perfect, I said. You just have to stop disappearing. He nodded. Once. Like it landed in his chest. After they left, I stood on the porch, with the pie tin in my hands. Still warm. A breeze moved through the wisteria vines. The last light of day brushed gold across the railing. And I knew. This was enough. Not victory. Not vindication. But return. In whatever form it would take. That night I wrote one last letter. To no one in particular. Just a line on thick paper in blue ink. Respect is not a gift, it is a mirror. And I have finally learned to stop wiping it clean for people who refuse to look. I folded it. Tucked it behind the old photograph of George. Then I turned out the lights. Left the door unlocked. Just in case. Because healing does not always mean forgetting. Sometimes it simply means you remember without losing yourself. The late sunlight touched the rim of the pie dish, and for a moment, the kitchen felt whole again. I've learned that dignity isn't declared. It is practiced. In teaspoons. In stillness. In names you refuse to let vanish. What is the smallest act of quiet strength you've ever chosen for yourself? We'd love to read your story below. You are not alone. Your legacy is safe here. Subscribe to Grandma Radio, where every story is a second chance.